The great hall of the Thraxian War Council was bathed in the crimson light of Zarathest's dying sun. The enormous, sleek walls of the chamber were lined with trophies, remnants of countless conquests. Skulls from various species, torn banners of defeated empires, and fragments of shattered weapons gleamed in the dim light. At the center of the room, hovering above a cold metallic table, was the holographic image of a small blue-green planet, Earth. General Var then stood before the projection, his imposing figure casting a shadow across the room. His black-scaled skin shimmered slightly as he moved, and his crimson eyes narrowed in contempt. Behind him, the War Council members, high-ranking Thraxian generals and strategists, sat in heavy iron thrones, all watching with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Vathan's voice, sharp and cold, sliced through the silence. "This insignificant world," he began, pointing a taloned finger at the image of Earth, "sits on the fringes of the galaxy. Primitive. Weak. It has no notable defenses, no fleet capable of interstellar travel, and their most advanced weaponry," he paused, his lips curling into a sneer, "is nuclear. Crude and dangerous only to themselves. I say it is time to take it." The room was still. Then, the first murmur of agreement rippled through the ranks. But not all were convinced. "General Var, then," came a voice from the far side of the table. It was Captain Rock, one of the more seasoned and thoughtful members of the council. His gray, battle-scarred face was marked with hesitation. "If Earth is as vulnerable as you say, why has it never been taken? Why have none of the other empires claimed it? The Grixons, the Wekanear swarm, even the Vothari raiders, all far more advanced than these humans, yet they withdrew. There are rumors, General. Stories." Varthan turned slowly to face him, his eyes gleaming with disdain. "Rumors," he repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Stories told by the weak to justify their cowardice." Rock shifted in his seat, but did not back down. "The Grixons vanished after scouting the planet. Their fleet was never seen again. The Wekanear Queen herself turned away from Earth after sending her drones to survey it. They didn't return either. And the Vothari raiders—" "Enough!" Varthan's roar echoed through the hall, silencing Rock. "I care nothing for the failures of lesser species. The Thraxian Empire does not retreat at shadows. Earth is ripe for the taking. It is an isolated world, unaware of the greater galaxy. We will descend upon them, and by the time they realize what has happened, it will be too late." "But General," Rock started. "Do you doubt our strength, Captain?" Vathan's tone was deadly, and his eyes narrowed to slits. His grip on the hilt of his ceremonial blade tightened. "Do you fear this backwater world?" A tense silence hung in the air as the other council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Rock straightened, meeting Varthan's glare, his voice steady but low. "No, General. I do not fear Earth. I fear that we may be walking into a trap we do not understand." Varthan gave a low, guttural chuckle that echoed across the chamber. "A trap. From them." He gestured mockingly toward the image of Earth. "Humans. They are barely a step beyond stone and fire. I've studied their culture, their history. Their greatest conflicts are over resources, territory, petty rivalries. They kill each other with reckless abandon. They have no unity, no empire. They are a divided species." The council murmured in agreement again, their confidence swelling with Varthan's words. But Rock remained unconvinced, his unease growing. "I've studied them as well, General," Rock replied. "Perhaps they are divided, yes. But the fact remains, no one who has sought to conquer them has succeeded, and we do not know why." Varthan waved a dismissive hand. "Superstition. The galaxy is full of it. We are Thraxians, the strongest force in this sector, and soon, all sectors. Refuse to let the myths of lesser beings dictate our path. We shall move forward with the invasion." Rock's jaw tightened, but he knew better than to argue further. Varthan had made up his mind, and the council, swayed by the general's certainty, would follow him. An elderly strategist, General Zalrin, leaned forward from his seat at the far end of the table. His voice, gravelly with age but still authoritative, broke the tension. "Varthan has a point. The humans are primitive. Their technology poses no real threat to us. If there is something more to Earth, we will find out soon enough. I say we proceed," but cautiously. Proceed. Varthan scoffed. We will not proceed cautiously. We will crush them. In one swift strike, we will end their resistance before it even begins. Caution is for those who doubt. We do not doubt. We conquer. The council members, emboldened by Varthan's confidence, nodded in agreement. The decision had been made. Very well, General, Rock said, lowering his head slightly in deference. But I urge you to consider one thing. If we are wrong, if there is something protecting Earth that we have overlooked, we may be unprepared for what we encounter. Varthan turned to face the holographic projection again, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. If there is something protecting Earth, Captain, he said softly, then we will destroy that too. He waved his clawed hand, and the holographic display shifted to reveal the full might of the Thraxian fleet. Hundreds of warships, bristling with weapons, waiting in orbit around Zereth, ready to descend upon Earth like a plague of locusts. Prepare the fleet, Varthan commanded. We launch in 3 rotations. Earth will fall, and we will show the galaxy that no one, not even these humans, can escape the wrath of the Thraxian Empire. As the council dispersed, Rock lingered for a moment, casting a final uneasy glance at the image of Earth. Something about this mission felt wrong. But the decision had been made, and he could only hope that Varthan's arrogance would not lead them into disaster. With a heavy heart, he turned and followed the others out of the chamber, the distant hum of the war machines preparing for their next conquest echoing through the halls. The invasion of Earth had begun. The vastness of space was broken by the sudden shimmer of warships emerging from hyperspace. The Thraxian fleet, hundreds of blackened, insect-like vessels, darkened the sky above Earth as they dropped out of orbit, their descent creating a ghostly eclipse. From the lead ship, the Wrath of Zereth, General Var then stood at the command deck, his eyes fixed on the blue-green planet below. Magnificent, Var then murmured, the sharp edges of his lips curling into a smile. They don't even know we're here. Around him, his officers worked silently, their clawed hands flicking across control panels. The hum of the ship's engines was barely audible beneath the cold, mechanical efficiency of the Thraxian war machine. Distance to planet surface? Varthan asked, never turning from the view. 5,000 units, General, a technician responded, his voice clipped and precise. Varthan's second-in-command, Captain Rock, stood beside him, his gaze heavy with unease. The surface of Earth grew larger in the viewport, its oceans glimmering with reflected sunlight, its landmasses dotted with cities. There was no panic below, no sign of alarm. The humans were completely unaware of what was coming. How strange, Rock muttered under his breath, his eyes narrowing. Why are they not reacting? Varthan heard the comment and turned his head slightly, one eyebrow raised. What did you expect, Captain? They are too primitive to even detect our approach. Their technology barely allows them to reach their own moon. Rock didn't respond immediately, his fingers tracing the smooth metal of the console in front of him. Still, he said quietly, most species, no matter how primitive, have some instinct for survival. Yet there is no fear. Look at them. He pointed to the display showing live footage from their drones scattered over the surface. They're gathering. Varthan glanced at the screen. He saw it too. Humans in the hundreds, no, thousands, were assembling in large groups across the planet's major cities. They were standing in open spaces, gazing up at the sky. Calm. Silent. They are fools, Varthan scoffed. Let them gather. It will make their annihilation more efficient. Rock pressed on, his brow furrowing. I don't like it, General. There's something wrong. It's almost as if they know we're here, but they're not afraid. Enough, Captain. Varthan snapped, his patience thinning. Your obsession with these humans is tiresome. They are nothing. We will crush them, and then we will move on to more significant conquests. General, an officer interrupted, we are now within striking range. Shall we deploy the assault drones? Varthan waved a hand dismissively. Yes, deploy them. Let us see how these fearless humans react when the skies rain fire. From the underside of the Thraxian warships, thousands of sleek, black drones detached, their engines flaring to life as they descended towards Earth's surface. Each one was armed with pulse cannons capable of reducing entire buildings to rubble in seconds. The humans below would not stand a chance. Lock onto their largest population centers, Varthan ordered. London, New York, Beijing, Tokyo. Let them feel the might of the Thraxian Empire. As the drones sped toward their targets, Rock watched the displays intently. The humans still did not flee. They simply stood there, waiting. "General," Rock began cautiously, "I believe we should." But before he could finish, a sudden alarm blared across the command deck. The lights flickered, and the holographic displays stuttered for a moment. Varthan's eyes narrowed, and he turned toward the control pit. "What is happening?" he demanded. "General," a technician shouted, his voice frantic. "We're detecting massive energy readings from the surface. They're coming from multiple locations. No, from all over the planet." Varthan's jaw clenched. "Impossible. What kind of readings?" They're off the charts," the technician stammered, his hands flying across his console. "We've never seen anything like it. And our drones are being disrupted." Rock stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. "Show me the footage." The screens shifted to display the drone's view as they neared the surface. What they saw made even Varthan falter. Massive creatures, larger than any ship in the Thraxian fleet, were rising from the oceans. Their forms were immense, shimmering with iridescent scales that glowed with an ancient, cosmic energy. Leviathans, creatures of myth, roared as they broke through the waves. In the mountains, enormous mechanical constructs stirred from their slumber. Their designs were ancient, but the power they radiated was far beyond anything the Thraxians had encountered. These titanic war machines, buried for eons, awakened to defend their planet. And in the skies, beams of light streaked upward from the ground, humans, but not just humans. Ethereal figures, beings made of pure energy, rose from the cities, their forms pulsing with the same energy that now disrupted the Thraxian ships. "What is this?" Varthan whispered, his voice uncharacteristically shaken. "General," another technician cried. "Our drones, they're being destroyed. We're losing control." On the display, the drones were torn apart mid-flight, ripped to pieces by invisible forces. The leviathans in the oceans let out deep, thunderous roars, swiping their massive tails and crushing any Thraxian drone that dared approach. The war machines on the land began firing impossibly powerful beams of energy, disintegrating ships and drones alike. The ethereal beings, with just a flick of their hands, sent torrents of power surging toward the fleet, bypassing the Thraxians' once impenetrable shields as if they were nothing. Varthan slammed his fist down on the console. "Pull back! Pull the drones back and regroup." But his voice no longer held the same confidence as before. Rock, his eyes wide, turned to the general. "I told you," he said, his voice low but steady. "Something was protecting this planet. And we just woke it up." Varthan's claws dug into the metal of the console. "I will not be defeated by a myth," he snarled. "Prepare the fleet for a full assault. We will crush them, no matter what ancient magic they summon." But even as he gave the command, the Thraxian ships shuddered. Systems flickered on and off as the strange energy emanating from the planet interfered with their technology. The ethereal beings continued their assault, and the leviathans began rising toward the skies, their gargantuan forms casting shadows over the invading fleet. "General," one of the officers called out, her voice trembling, "we can't hold them back. Our systems are failing, and the energy signatures are increasing. We're being overwhelmed." Varthan bared his fangs, rage boiling beneath his skin. "Impossible," he growled, his hands gripping the console. "We are the Thraxian Empire. We do not flee." But even as he spoke, the truth became undeniable. The defenders of Earth, whatever they were far more powerful than anything he had anticipated. And they were not defending out of fear. They were defending out of certainty, confidence. Rock stood silent, watching the ancient forces of Earth decimate their invincible fleet. He had warned them. But now it was too late. "We should never have come here," Rock whispered to himself, though he knew the words fell on deaf ears. Far below, the humans continued to gather, unaware of the cosmic battle above, yet somehow connected to the titanic forces that protected them. They were the key to this strange power, whether they knew it or not. And the Thraxians, with all their technology and arrogance, had just stepped into something far beyond their understanding. Deep within the bowels of the earth, in places where no human had set foot for thousands of years, ancient things stirred. Buried beneath layers of rock, ocean, and forgotten history, These beings had slumbered in peace, until now. The invasion from the sky, the sudden assault from beyond the stars, had triggered something primal, something long buried. In the deepest trenches of the Pacific Ocean, a soft glow began to pulse, growing brighter with every passing second. Beneath the waves, nestled in a chasm so deep it defied even human technology, lay a colossal form. It shifted, the slow, deliberate movement of something ancient awakening from its rest. The Leviathan, larger than any living creature on Earth, blinked its massive eyes, shimmering with cosmic energy, and slowly rose. Far above the chasm, aboard the Wrath of Zereth, General Var then stood on the command deck, staring at the glowing energy readings that filled the screen. "What are we looking at?" Var then demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "General, it appears there are colossal life forms rising from the ocean depths," one of the technicians stammered. His voice quivered, as though he didn't believe what he was seeing. "They're massive. Bigger than any organic form we've ever recorded." Varthan's claws tapped rhythmically on the metal console. "Deploy the assault fleet. I don't care how large these creatures are. Nothing can withstand Thraxian firepower." But Captain Rock, standing at Varthan's side, was staring at the screen with growing horror. "General, we must reconsider. These aren't just creatures. Look at the energy signatures. They're beyond anything we've ever encountered. They're not normal life forms. They're something else." Varthan snapped his head toward Rock, his fangs bared. "You speak like a coward, Rock. Whatever they are, they will fall like all the others. These are just animals. Nothing more. Do you doubt the power of the Thraxian Empire?" Rock clenched his jaw but held his tongue. He could feel the fear rising in his chest. It wasn't just the size of the creatures, or the power radiating from them, it was the certainty that they had been guarding Earth for eons, waiting for an invasion like this. These were no ordinary beasts. Below the surface of the ocean, the Leviathan rose to meet the invaders. Its body, more massive than a small city, shimmered in the dark waters as bioluminescent patterns rippled across its skin. Eyes the size of mountains blinked slowly, glowing with the power of the stars. As it surfaced, the waves parted around it, and the sky seemed to darken in response to its presence. And then it roared. A deep, guttural sound that reverberated across the ocean and sky, a primal call that was felt more than heard. The Thraxian ships in its vicinity vibrated violently, their systems momentarily disrupted by the sheer force of the creature's energy. On the command deck, Varthan's eyes widened in fury. "Destroy it! Fire everything we have!" The nearest Thraxian warships unleashed their full arsenal. Massive plasma beams and missiles streaked through the air, converging on the Leviathan. But as the energy struck the creature's skin, it dissipated, absorbed into the shimmering bioluminescence that danced across its form. The Leviathan turned its massive head toward the attacking ships, and with another earth-shaking roar, it sent a wave of energy rippling through the ocean and sky. The first Thraxian ship exploded, torn apart by the sheer force of the wave. Another was sent spinning, its shields flickering and dying before it crashed into the water below, disappearing beneath the surface. "General," one of the officers cried, panic rising in his voice. "Our weapons are ineffective. The energy from the creature is overwhelming our systems. We can't." "Silence!" Varthan snarled. His fist slammed down on the console, his eyes blazing with fury. "We will not be humiliated by an animal." But it wasn't just the Leviathans that were awakening. In the remote wilderness of Earth's mountain ranges, where no human settlements existed, more of Earth's defenders stirred. Massive war machines, buried deep within the Earth since time immemorial, began to rumble to life. Their designs were alien, yet impossibly ancient. Towering constructs of metal and stone rose from the ground, shaking off the dust of centuries. Their joints creaked and groaned, but their power was undeniable. On the surface, the ground trembled as the war machines took their first steps in millennia. Towering above the tree-line, their glowing eyes scanned the skies, locking onto the Thraxian warships descending from the heavens. Slowly, the war machines raised their arms. Massive cannons embedded in their limbs hummed to life, gathering energy. Back on the Wrath of Zereth, the situation was spiraling out of control. The command deck was filled with the sound of alarms and panicked voices. "General!" Rock shouted, stepping closer to Varthan. "These aren't just mindless beasts or relics. They're part of some ancient defense system. This planet has been protected for eons by forces we don't understand. We must retreat. Varthan spun on him, his eyes ablaze with fury. Retreat? You think the Thraxian Empire flees from oversized creatures and dusty machines? I will not. Before he could finish, the command deck shook violently as one of the war machines below fired its cannon. A beam of pure energy, brighter and more focused than anything the Thraxians had ever encountered, lanced up from the surface and struck one of the lead warships. The ship's shields flared and failed in an instant, and the vessel was torn apart, its debris raining down toward Earth like falling stars. Rock gripped the railing for support, his heart pounding in his chest. General, we are not prepared for this. These defenses, they are beyond anything we've ever seen. You must call for a retreat before we lose the entire fleet. For a moment, Varthan stood frozen, his mind torn between pride and the growing realization that they were facing something far more powerful than they had ever anticipated. His pride, however, refused to give in so easily. No, he growled through clenched teeth. We press the attack. Send more drones. Fire every weapon we have. We will. Before he could finish, the viewports on the bridge flickered with bright light. Rock turned just in time to see something he couldn't fully comprehend. Ethereal figures, humanoid in shape but glowing with pure energy, rose from the cities. Their forms shimmered like mirages, yet their power was undeniable. They hovered above the surface, their arms outstretched as they directed beams of energy toward the Thraxian ships. The fleet's shields, once thought impenetrable, collapsed under the onslaught. One by one, the Thraxian warships began to fail. Explosions rocked the skies, and wreckage fell from orbit, burning as it entered the atmosphere. Rock staggered back, his face pale. General, if we do not retreat now, there will be nothing left of the fleet. Varthan, now visibly shaken, stared out at the devastation. His hands trembled, his mind racing. He had never experienced defeat, never thought it possible. But now, faced with the overwhelming power of Earth's ancient defenders, he could no longer deny the truth. With a final, reluctant growl, he gave the order. Fall back. Get us out of here. Now. The surviving ships began to pull away from Earth's atmosphere, limping back into the safety of space. But the damage had already been done. The Thraxian fleet had been decimated, and Earth, this seemingly defenseless world, had proven far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. As the Leviathans sank back into the ocean and the war machines returned to their dormant state, Rock stood on the bridge, his heart heavy with the weight of what had just happened. We were fools, he muttered to himself. This world is not to be touched. Far below, the humans, unaware of the cosmic battle that had just taken place, continued their lives, oblivious to the ancient forces that had protected them once again. And in the quiet depths of the earth, the Guardians returned to their eternal watch. The skies above Earth had become a battlefield, with the Thraxian fleet clinging to its last vestiges of control. Fires burned through the once impervious warships, debris scattered across the upper atmosphere, and the air crackled with energy as ancient powers unleashed their fury upon the invaders. On board the Wrath of Zareth, General Varthan stood rigid, his eyes wide with fury, yet a tremor of fear twisted in his gut, a sensation unfamiliar to him. General, multiple systems are failing, shouted one of the technicians, his hands flying over the console. Our shields are collapsing, and our weapons are at 30% effectiveness. Divert all power to the shields. Varthan barked. We will not fall to these abominations. But, General, the energy from the surface. I said divert all power. Varthan's voice boomed across the bridge, silencing the panicked officer. Captain Rock, standing beside Varthan, observed the devastation unfolding on the screens. The Thraxian drones, once invincible machines of war, were disintegrating as they flew toward the surface, torn apart by invisible forces or destroyed by beams of energy fired from the ethereal beings floating above Earth cities. The massive leviathans from the oceans had wreaked havoc on the fleet, their gargantuan forms striking down ships with terrifying ease. General, we cannot win this fight, Rock said firmly, his voice calm but urgent. You must call for a full retreat before we lose everything. Varthan turned to face Rock, his eyes blazing with defiance. Retreat? You speak of retreat now, Captain? You doubt the strength of the Thraxian Empire? Rock's expression remained unreadable, but inside, he was struggling to contain his frustration. General, this is not about doubt. We are facing forces beyond our understanding. These creatures, these beings, they are not what we expected. Every moment we stay here, more ships are lost. If we don't pull back, there will be no one left to return home." Varthan clenched his fists, his pride battling against the undeniable truth. The Thraxian fleet was being torn apart by something they could not comprehend, and his failure to act sooner was costing them dearly. His lips curled back in a snarl, but the realization had finally begun to settle in. "General," one of the officers cried, pointing to the central display. "Look!" The screen flickered to show one of the Thraxian dreadnoughts, the Spear of Zareth, struggling against the force of the Leviathan rising from the ocean below. The creature's massive, glowing eyes locked onto the ship, and with a single devastating swipe of its tail, the Leviathan tore through the dreadnought's hull. The ship exploded in a fiery cascade, its fragments raining down toward the ocean like falling stars. Varthan's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing as the last remnants of his bravado crumbled. "Prepare the retreat," Varthan growled. "Get us out of this system." Rock nodded, already issuing orders to the crew. "All ships, disengage immediately. Plot a course back to Zareth. We are retreating." The bridge erupted into controlled chaos as officers scrambled to reroute power to the engines and send a retreat order across the fleet. The remaining warships, battered and broken, began to pull away from Earth's atmosphere, desperately trying to break free from the planet's gravitational pull. As the Thraxian ships withdrew, the ethereal beings hovering above Earth cities watched them go, their glowing forms pulsing with quiet energy. They made no move to pursue. The invaders had been driven off, and their purpose was complete. Slowly, the energy beings descended back to the surface, fading into the background like mist dissipating under the morning sun. Back aboard the Wrath of Zareth, Rock breathed a sigh of relief as the ship began to gain distance from Earth. The fleet was in ruins, dozens of warships lost, and the rest barely holding together. The devastation was more than any of them had anticipated. But as the ship ascended into the safety of space, the alarms blared again. Rock's eyes widened as he saw new readings flash across his console. "General, something's happening on the surface," Rock said, his voice tense. "The energy levels are spiking again." Varthan spun to face the central display, his eyes narrowing. "What now?" The screen flickered to show Earth's surface once again, but this time, something was different. The war machines, the Leviathans, and the ethereal beings were no longer the only threats. From deep within the planet's crust, strange patterns of light began to emerge, webs of energy, pulsing and spreading across the planet like veins. They were ancient, powerful, and alive with cosmic energy. "What is that?" Varthan muttered, his voice betraying a trace of fear. Rock's brow furrowed as he studied the readings. "It's coming from the planet's core. Some kind of power source. I've never seen anything like it." Then, without warning, a massive pulse of energy erupted from the planet, shooting out in all directions. The pulse swept across space, its impact so powerful that even the Thraxian fleet, now several thousand kilometers from Earth, shook violently. "Shields are collapsing," an officer shouted. "Brace for impact." Rock called out, gripping the edge of the console. The energy pulse struck the fleet with the force of a supernova. The remaining ships were thrown into disarray, some spinning out of control, others losing power entirely. The Wrath of Zareth groaned under the strain, its hull buckling but somehow holding together. "General, we're losing engines," an engineer shouted from below. Varthan's claws dug into the armrest of his command chair, his teeth grinding together in helpless fury. How can this primitive world possess such power? Before anyone could answer, the screens flickered, and a distorted voice cut through the noise on the bridge. It was soft, yet carried with it the weight of something ancient and all-knowing. "You were warned." The crew froze, their eyes darting around in confusion. The voice wasn't coming from any known source, it seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Rock's blood ran cold. Who said that?" "You were warned," the voice repeated, more distinct now. "Earth is not yours to take. This planet has been protected since long before your kind ever took to the stars." Varthan stood, his body trembling with rage. "Who dares?" The voice cut him off. "Leave this place, and never return." As the final word echoed across the bridge, the energy pulse faded, and the screens returned to normal. Silence filled the room, save for the quiet hum of the failing engines. The crew exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what had just happened. Varthan stood motionless, his face pale and his eyes wide. For the first time in his long career, he felt a sensation he had never known, complete and utter defeat. "General?" Rock asked quietly, stepping closer. Varthan's voice, when he spoke, was barely above a whisper. "Get us out of here. Now." Rock nodded and turned to the crew. "All ships, prepare for emergency jump. We leave this system immediately." Within moments, the remaining Thraxian ships activated their jump drives, and with a final flash of light, they disappeared into the void of space, leaving Earth behind. Back on Earth, the skies returned to their natural blue, the last traces of the battle above fading into the distance. The Leviathans sank back into the oceans, their massive forms disappearing beneath the waves. The war machines settled back into the mountains, their ancient eyes dimming once again. And the ethereal beings, those strange protectors of the planet, faded into the background, their presence felt but unseen. In the quiet aftermath, life on Earth continued as if nothing had happened. The humans below remained oblivious to the titanic battle that had taken place just above their heads. To them, it was just another day, another rotation of the planet, nothing out of the ordinary. But far beneath the surface, in a chamber older than civilization itself, the Guardians watched. Their task was complete, for now. The threat had been driven away, and Earth was safe once more. For now. In the darkness of space, the shattered remains of the Thraxian fleet limped toward the outer edge of the solar system. Varthan sat alone in his quarters, staring at the empty void before him, his mind reeling from the catastrophic failure. He had underestimated Earth, underestimated the power that lay hidden beneath its surface. But as he sat there, his thoughts began to twist and churn with a new resolve. "This isn't over," Varthan whispered to himself, his voice cold and dangerous. "One day, Earth will fall, and I will be the one to take it." But deep down, even Varthan knew the truth. Earth was no ordinary planet, and whatever forces protected it were far older and far more powerful than anything he could imagine. For now, Earth would remain untouched. But the galaxy had learned a lesson that day, a lesson it would not soon forget. Far below the surface of Earth, in a chamber that had existed long before humans built their first cities, a group of cloaked figures gathered. The room was carved out of ancient stone, with walls adorned in symbols that no modern human could decipher. A faint, ethereal light emanated from crystals embedded in the rock, casting long shadows across the stone floor. At the center of the chamber, a large crystalline screen shimmered, displaying the last moments of the battle above Earth. The screen flickered as the Thraxian fleet, battered and broken, disappeared into the void of space. The cloaked figures remained silent, their faces hidden beneath deep hoods, watching as the remnants of the invaders retreated. Finally, one of the figures, an old man with a voice like creaking stone, broke the silence. "They came just as the others did," he rasped, his voice filled with ancient wisdom. "Arrogant. Believing themselves invincible." Another figure, shorter but exuding an aura of immense power, nodded. Her voice was soft yet commanding, like the whisper of the wind through the trees. "And just like the others, they have learned. Earth is not defenseless. It never has been." "Do you think they will return?" asked a third figure, his voice trembling slightly, betraying his unease. He was the youngest among them, still unsure of his place among the Guardians. The old man chuckled softly, the sound echoing eerily in the chamber. "Perhaps. But not for a long time. And when they do, we will be ready." The younger Guardian stepped forward, pulling his hood back to reveal a pale, determined face. His eyes gleamed with curiosity and a hint of fear. "Why don't we reveal ourselves? Why do we let them come, only to drive them away when it's too late? Couldn't we prevent this? Why not show the galaxy our strength?" The others remained silent for a moment, and the air in the chamber grew heavy with ancient knowledge. The older Guardian turned slowly to face the young man, his eyes glowing faintly beneath his hood. "Because, young one, we do not seek war. We are not conquerors. The forces that protect Earth are not weapons to be used lightly. They are guardians, just as we are. We only awaken them when the need is great." The younger Guardian frowned. "But what if one day the invaders don't retreat? What if they learn from their defeat and return stronger? What if we cannot stop them?" The female Guardian stepped forward, her hand lightly brushing the young man's arm, her touch both comforting and commanding. "We have faced many invaders over the millennia. Some have returned. Some have not. But the power that protects this planet is not something they can ever fully comprehend. It is not just the creatures, the war machines, or the energy beings. It is something older. Something deeper." The young guardian's brow furrowed. "The core." The others nodded in unison, a silent agreement passing between them. The core, an ancient, sentient force that lay at the heart of the Earth itself, was the true protector of the planet. It had existed since long before humans, long before even the Guardians themselves. It was the source of the strange energy that had overwhelmed the Thraxian fleet, the power that animated the Leviathans, the war machines, and the ethereal beings. The old man spoke again, his voice quieter now. "The core is not to be disturbed unless the threat is dire. And even then, we only awaken its guardians, not the core itself. It has its own will, its own mind. If it ever fully awakens," he paused, his gaze heavy, "even we may not be able to control it." The young guardian swallowed hard, the weight of the revelation sinking in. He had heard of the core in his teachings, but never had he grasped its full significance. Now, standing in this chamber, surrounded by those who had protected the planet for millennia, he understood the true gravity of their responsibility. "So," he said slowly, "we let these invaders come because they are not yet a threat great enough to awaken the core." "Exactly," the female guardian replied, her eyes meeting his with a piercing gaze. "The Thraxians were strong, but they were arrogant and foolish. They underestimated the power that lies dormant here. As many before them have. And as many after them will," the old guardian added with a wry smile. The young guardian took a deep breath. What if one day someone is strong enough to force the core to awaken? The chamber fell silent again. The question hung in the air, unanswered. The guardians, despite their ancient knowledge and immense power, were not omniscient. There were things even they did not know, secrets hidden in the deep places of the earth, in the core itself. "We prepare," the old guardian said finally. "That is all we can do. For now, the core remains quiet, and the planet is safe. But should the day come when it is fully awakened, we must be ready." Far above, in the clear blue skies of Earth, the remnants of the battle had all but faded. The Leviathans had returned to the depths of the oceans, their massive forms sinking back into the abyss from which they had come. The war machines had settled into the mountains, their energy cores dimming, their metal limbs once again still. And the ethereal beings, those strange protectors of Earth, had dissolved into the air, becoming one with the planet's natural energy. In the bustling cities below, life went on as usual. The humans remained blissfully unaware of the cosmic conflict that had taken place just above their heads. They went to work, played, and lived their lives, oblivious to the fact that their world had been invaded by an alien force, and saved by powers they could never truly understand. In one such city, a young woman sat on the roof of her apartment building, staring up at the sky. She had felt something strange earlier that day, a tremor in the air, a sense of something massive and powerful moving just out of sight. But when she looked around, everything seemed normal. No one else had noticed. No one else had felt it. "Just my imagination," she muttered to herself, shaking her head. But even as she tried to dismiss the feeling, a shiver ran down her spine. Back in the hidden chamber, the Guardians watched the crystalline screen as the last traces of the Thraxian fleet disappeared into the void. The threat had passed, but the Guardians knew better than to grow complacent. The galaxy was vast, and Earth, despite its apparent insignificance, held a secret that many would seek to claim. The female Guardian turned to the others, her voice calm yet filled with a quiet determination. "We must remain vigilant. There will always be those who seek to take what is not theirs. The galaxy will never stop trying." The old man nodded. "And we will never stop protecting it." The younger Guardian, still processing everything he had learned, looked at the ancient symbols on the walls. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on him, the responsibility of protecting a planet that most of its inhabitants did not even realize was in danger. But he also felt something else, a quiet strength, a resolve that had been passed down through generations of Guardians before him. "I understand now," he said softly, "why we stay hidden. Why we let them come, and only act when necessary." The old man smiled, his eyes twinkling with ancient wisdom. "Good. You are learning, young one. Earth is not just a planet. It is a sanctuary, and we are its watchful keepers. As the guardians gathered in the center of the chamber, their hands raised toward the crystal, the light began to dim, and the room grew quiet. The threat was gone, for now. But the guardians would not rest. They would continue their eternal watch, always ready to defend Earth from those who sought to disturb the balance. And beneath the surface of the planet, deep in its core, the ancient power that had protected Earth for millennia remained quiet, for now. But it was always watching, always waiting. In the quiet aftermath of the battle, Earth's skies had returned to their usual serene blue. The once vast and terrifying Thraxian fleet had been reduced to scattered debris, with the survivors retreating to lick their wounds in distant parts of the galaxy. Yet, on the surface, life continued as though nothing extraordinary had happened. The people of Earth remained unaware of the cosmic forces that had defended their home. In a small town on the outskirts of a forest, a little boy kicked a soccer ball down a dirt path, unaware of the massive leviathan that had risen from the ocean just hours ago. As he chased after the ball, he noticed an older man sitting on a bench nearby, watching the sky with an intensity that seemed out of place for the peaceful surroundings. The boy, curious, approached the man. "Hey, mister. What are you looking at?" The man, dressed in simple clothes but with an air of wisdom about him, smiled gently. "The sky, young one. Always the sky." The boy looked up, confused. "But there's nothing there." The man chuckled softly. "Not today. But sometimes, there's more to the sky than you realize." The boy frowned, trying to understand, but the mystery of the man's words was lost on him. He shrugged and ran off after his ball, leaving the man alone with his thoughts. In the hidden chamber deep beneath the Earth's surface, the guardians had returned to their silent vigil. The ancient crystalline screen before them had gone dark, the battle above Earth now just a memory. But their work was never truly done. The galaxy was vast, and Earth, a planet rich with hidden power, would always be a target. The younger guardian, the one still learning the ways of their ancient order, stood before the others, his brow furrowed in thought. He was no longer the wide-eyed apprentice who had questioned their methods only days ago. The battle with the Thraxians had changed him. He had seen firsthand the power that slept beneath the surface of this world, and he had come to understand the delicate balance the guardians maintained. "Are we just going to wait for the next invader?" he asked, breaking the silence. His voice was steady but carried an edge of uncertainty. "What happens when the next fleet comes, stronger than the last? How long can we keep this hidden from the galaxy?" The elder guardian, the one who had lived through more invasions than the younger one could imagine, turned to face him. His eyes, glowing faintly beneath his hood, were filled with a patient wisdom. "We protect as we always have. Earth has stood for millennia, through challenges far greater than the Thraxians. The galaxy has always been a place of conflict, but Earth is a sanctuary, watched over by forces that even the stars fear. But what if one day," the young guardian persisted, "a force comes that is stronger than us? What if the core can't protect us forever?" The female guardian stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "The core is ancient and powerful, far beyond what most can comprehend. But it is not a weapon to be wielded carelessly. We do not awaken it lightly because its power is tied to the very fabric of this world. If it were to fully awaken, the consequences could be catastrophic, not just for Earth, but for the galaxy itself." The young guardian met her gaze, uncertainty still flickering in his eyes. "And if one day we have no choice?" "Then," the elder guardian said softly, "we will do what must be done. But that day has not yet come." In another part of the world, high in the Andes Mountains, a man sat at the edge of a cliff, overlooking the sprawling valley below. His clothes were simple, his face weathered by years of life in the mountains, but his eyes were sharp and focused. He was one of the few humans who knew of the ancient forces that protected the Earth, though he would never speak of it to anyone. As he gazed out over the horizon, he felt a familiar presence behind him. He did not turn. He knew who it was. "You felt it too," the man said, his voice barely above a whisper. Behind him, another figure appeared, her steps soft and silent. She was dressed in simple, traditional clothing, but her presence was anything but ordinary. "Yes," she replied, her voice as calm as the wind that swept through the mountains. The guardians acted, as they always do. The man nodded slowly. "We are lucky. Most of the world has no idea what really happened up there. Luck has nothing to do with it, the woman said, sitting down beside him. The Guardians have been doing this for as long as we've existed. They've kept the balance, ensured that Earth remains untouched by forces that could destroy us. The man sighed, looking down at his weathered hands. But for how long? What happens when their power isn't enough? The woman smiled, a knowing smile that seemed to stretch beyond the boundaries of time. The Earth itself is more powerful than you realize. And the core, it will act if it must. But not before. The man remained silent, his thoughts heavy. I've seen too much to believe that we're untouchable. I worry about the day when something comes that the Guardians can't stop. The core, the woman repeated, her eyes distant, will only awaken when all other options have been exhausted. It is both protector and destroyer. And even we, those of us who know, cannot truly understand its will. Meanwhile, far away from the mountains and hidden chambers, in one of Earth's many bustling cities, a young woman named Alia sat in a crowded coffee shop, tapping her fingers on the table as she waited for her order. She had always been sensitive to the world around her, in ways she couldn't quite explain. Today, though, there was something different in the air. Something strange. Alia leaned back in her chair, gazing out the window at the cloudless sky. She had felt it earlier, like a ripple passing through the world. It wasn't anything she could describe to her friends or family without sounding insane, but she knew it wasn't her imagination. Her phone buzzed on the table, pulling her back to the present. A message from a coworker flashed on the screen, asking if she was coming to the office later. Alia sighed and put the phone down, her thoughts still lingering on that strange feeling. Maybe it was nothing, she told herself. Or maybe it was something she wasn't meant to understand. She had no way of knowing that, mere hours ago, forces beyond her comprehension had fought to keep her world safe. The creatures that had risen from the oceans, the machines buried in the mountains, and the energy beings that had filled the skies, they had all acted to protect her, though she would never know it. "Here's your coffee," the barista said, setting the cup down in front of her with a smile. "Thanks," Alia replied absently, still staring out the window. As she sipped her coffee, the strange feeling slowly began to fade. The world outside seemed so normal, so peaceful. And yet, deep inside her, she couldn't shake the sense that something big had happened, something that had changed the course of her life, even if she didn't understand how. Back in the hidden chamber beneath the earth, the Guardians remained in their silent vigil. Their duty, as it had been for millennia, was to watch and protect, always in the shadows. They knew that Earth's greatest strength was not its armies or its weapons, but the ancient power that lay beneath its surface, a power that most of the galaxy still didn't fully understand. And so, as they had done many times before, the Guardians waited. They knew that Earth's quiet power, the power of the core, would always be there when needed. But they also knew that the balance they maintained was fragile, and that one day, it might be tested again. For now, though, the planet was safe. But somewhere in the galaxy, the story of Earth's strange and overwhelming defenses was spreading. Other forces were watching. Other powers were calculating. And while Earth remained untouched, it would not remain unchallenged forever. The Guardians knew that. They always did. But they were ready. And so was the Earth.